Amen. Hey, thanks, Rachel. Well, kia ora tātou, how are you? Very good. Okay, the video is next level today, eh? Feels intimidating. Excellent. You're not, okay, very good. Okay.
We're on TV all the time.
Who cares? That's right. Okay. Well, we're looking at small groups, and when it comes to training small group leaders, my philosophy of this has been that there's kind of 50 things that you could look at and be trained in, and we could busy ourselves with that. But what are the core things that are needed for someone to get a breakthrough and be successful? One of the foundations for me is that I believe in intentional disciple making. That is to say that I think we're supposed to be becoming like Jesus increasingly over time. And I think that our fellowship together in our small groups is supposed to be actually delivering measurable, observable results. Yeah. And so the question is, how do we get actual results in terms of life change, group dynamic growth, as well as through outreach? So like a good educator, with 30 minutes, I am going to summarise the previous session before I start. Because if there's no repetition, there's probably no learning. And the chances are that you've forgotten everything that I said anyway, so I might as well not have spoken in the first place. So, first of all, regarding the primary goals of small groups, I put to you last time that the primaries are to love God, to love one another, and to make disciples. Or you could simply say love others, right? So love God, love one another, make disciples. Now, if we were to gun for a simple measurable for each of those, how about the primary thing to gun for in terms of loving God is to actually read your Bibles? Everything else, I suggest, springboards from a regular commitment to reading the Word. In terms of loving one another, more than 50 one another statements in the New Testament, I suggested that the key thing to gun for is that people turn up. They turn up to church on Sunday, they turn up to the small group on Wednesday or whenever it is. In terms of a commitment to making disciples or loving people beyond the church, I suggested the key thing is that we initiate spiritual conversations with people around us, in which case we would need to equip people with some basic conversational and gospel skills. Now the question is, how do you achieve this in a small group without interrupting the many other purposes you might think that your Connect group exists for? So let's say you get your way, how do we get ours as well? Number one, on the second week of each month, I suggested that you begin by asking the question, what did you get out of the Word of God this week in your personal Bible reading? And if you do that every second week of the month as a question transitioning from your welcome through to looking at the Word, you would begin to create a habit where people are aware they're going to be asked what they've been reading in the Bible and what they've got out of it. And that would begin to feed into reading the Bible. In terms of fellowship, you simply congratulate them when they turn up, but you give them a phone call if they don't and arrange to have coffee and see how they're going. In terms of outreach, how about on the first week of each month, you get people to pray for the 5 people they identified at the start of the year to answer the question, who would you like to encourage toward faith this year? Those are listed, 5-finger prayer, everybody in 1 minute, put your hand up, pray through your 5 people all at once. Then on the third week of each month, as you begin the Connect Group meeting, transitioning from the welcome through to the Word, you ask this question, who's had a chance to engage a spiritual conversation with someone lately? And simply every month, through a habit, draw out those testimonies. You would feed into the outreach life. And with some intentional encouragement connected to each of those 3 things, an 18-year-old who's taken on a small youth group, who has to teach 50 things, who's actually qualified to teach only 2, might achieve through their spare time with intentionality, young people reading their Bibles, being committed to fellowship, and actually engaging spiritual conversations with the purpose of being a witness. And I would say that that's not too shabby. And that's the first point. The second thing we looked at last time was what we do within a small group time. And the 5 W's, which is in a lot of the small group theory, is that there is a welcome, good to see you, how are you? Worship, we transition to a focus with God. Word, we look at something to learn. Witness, we consider our mission and our greater achieving of it. And works, what can we do to work this out? In other words, the announcements. So it's welcome, welcome, worship, word, witness, works. Or for the 5 G's, it's gel, glorify, grow, go, gear up. Same thing. And with those, the point was there's 2 you always have to have, and they are welcome, because it's always about people, and works, because it's always about vision. And these represent, you could say, 2 ways of thinking, 2 personality types, and 2 dynamics of the group. So if you had 1 hour 25 of welcome and 5 minutes of works, that's promoting the vision that's upcoming, that might be called a barbecue. If you had 10 minutes of welcome, 1 hour 10 of looking at the Word, and 10 minutes of works, that would be called a Bible study. If that was replaced with worship for the big segment, that might be a prayer meeting. Yep, and if you had 5 minutes of welcome and 1 hour 25 of works, that would be a vision casting and planning meeting for what you're going to do as a group, entirely focusing on your forward vision. Okay, now the third segment we looked at last time was conversational skills and 3 different dynamics within a conversation. So launching, guiding, and application. So launching is we open up completely wide, let's say how to give a 30-minute talk that covers 6 topics, which is what I'm attempting right now. Okay, so that's the title. The launching question could be, what's the longest 30-minute talk you've ever heard? Right? That might generate a little bit of discussion. But then you'd come into the guiding questions which are on topic. What are the keys to a clear, concise communication? But the application would be, which of these do you need to apply the next time you are speaking? So it's very broad, then it's on topic, but then it's very, very pinpoint specific. Okay, to move on, I also gave one message on the importance of small groups, and that really fitted into this topic. In terms of what's at the top of your notes, if I read this out, the early church met in large and small groups. What happens when we don't meet in small groups? The answer is the church in history has become hierarchical and has drifted from its fundamental purpose and has actually become corrupt. What happens if we don't meet in large groups, therefore we just meet in small groups? The answer is the church grows profusely, right? And that's what's been seen both in the early church under persecution as well as in the cell church movements of the last sort of 70-ish years. What then are the mission and purposes of the church small group? And I would suggest the answer is that they are all the same purposes as the church. Whatever the Sunday service exists for, the small group does. So like the funnel illustration, everything that's being discipled at the church, congregational level is also being discipled at the small group level. It's exactly the same stuff. And by having it at both levels, what it does is amplify the impact. Basic educational theory, and it has an impact. Now to look at something new, and we have 2 segments, and that took around about 7 minutes. Not too shabby, hey, for four topic areas. Okay. We're going to have a look next at the small group life cycle. If we want to be intentional disciple makers, to produce measurable change in people's lives and then becoming like Christ and doing things for Him, it's probably important that we understand the dynamics of what's going on in our groups at different seasons of their lives. So here's some basic theory. Stage 1 is the orientation stage. As in your notes, I've given you quite full notes today. This is the group when it's new. The vision is cast and it feels exciting. The new relationships are forming. You're intrigued by the different personality types within the group. You think they're going to be really interesting people to get to know. You're looking forward to going for week 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you come to stage 2, which is transition. Now in the transition stage, you begin to work out people's personalities, and it's not all as positive as you thought it might have been. As in your notes, some talk too much, some too little, some are opinionated, some always crack jokes. You're just not sure if this is a group that you're going to gel with as a whole. You then come to the community stage. You've worked out these different quirks and you're beginning to actually quite enjoy them. Because you ask a rhetorical question and you go, hey Bruce, what do you think about this? Knowing that he's going to crack a joke no matter what you say, right? And then you jump it across to the other side and you say, hey Mike, what do you think? And Mike suddenly says, whatever. Because you know that he's going to say nothing. And then you laugh at him because you knew he'd say nothing because that's his personality. And you carry on with your conversation comfortable with each other. This is a great group to be a part of. There's relationship, there is trust, and you're loving it. The next is the action stage. The group is intentionally turned to look beyond itself. Gifts and abilities are recognised and empowered. The health of the group now depends on balancing the energy put into your outreach or your service and ministry as a group with the energy that you put into sustaining and maintaining community within the group. If you spend too many coins doing outreach work as a group, the group's going to lose momentum and people will stop attending. You'll literally see it in your attendance. If you invest in the community, you'll see the warmth increasing. This leads to the multiplication stage, which I would say technically isn't a stage at all. It is instead the product of the previous 4, having been healthily journeyed through with new members having been added. Now, some other names for the first four, which are amusing, is the forming, storming, conforming and performing. So if you wanted to write those down. Forming, storming, conforming, and then performing. And the question is, which of the 5 stages is the most dangerous? So any thoughts?
I would personally look for community.
Why would you give it that one?
Because you can settle into comfortableness
Yeah.
and see that's the aim of your group.
Yeah. Does anyone have a different answer?
In the community stage, you could inadvertently keep others out.
Yeah. Yep, so you can keep others out at community. Yep, and all the books of theory on this always identify the community stage as the challenge. The transition stage is something you naturally go through, but the community is where we become inward looking. And I dare to say that most church groups in the Western world are probably in the community stage forever, and they've largely lost their sense of vision and direction, and they just become home fellowship groups, self-sustaining a bunch of nice relationships. I think that Jesus calls us to something more. In terms of the notes down the bottom here then, once you understand the stages that your group is in or going through, that at stage 1, the goal is to build relationships. You're learning about each other. You know, what's your name? Tell me about your family. What do you do for a job? What different jobs or occupations have you had? That sort of thing. As the relationships build, you're looking at bonding. And this is where you want to get people talking about what they think and feel. Get them talking about their opinions on A, B, or on C. What's the job they love the most? What's the hardest work circumstance that they have ever had? What's one of the biggest family challenges that they've ever come through the other end of somehow smiling? How did they come through? This is building trust and relationship. That brings us to a community stage. And then once you've got the community, you could begin to turn your focus and your welcome to team building. In other words, you can do intentional icebreakers at the beginning of a small group time, right? That could be on each of those different themes. Those are the different things you do at the different stages for that reason. And the focus from stage 1 to 2 is therefore more on the welcome, because you're trying to establish the relationships in the early stages. The focus at stages 3, 4, and 5 is more on the works. It's more about the vision and the direction that you're going in. So the way that you plan what you do every week in your welcome worship word works, witness and works, is influenced by where the group is at in its stage of the life cycle and by your overarching vision for the group and for its growth. Now, there is more that could be said on that, but that could be done on another round of this in another year. And to go for a final segment, because I'm really creaming it, any questions on that?
Can you just clarify what some of the like stage 4, what the places?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the spaces are down through the 5 is orientation, transition, then community, action, and multiplication.
The 2 gaps is 4 gaps.
Oh, the 2 gaps at number 4 are balancing the outreaching efforts with the community life of the group. Yeah. So that's output and input in balance. So forming, storming, norming, and performing. Yeah. Conforming or norming? Yep, very good. Yep, I agree. Well, multiplication would simply be the 5th. I don't have something that rhymes with storming or norming for multiplication. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Our final segment then, and what I'm covering here out of, I mentioned there's lots of things that could be trained, is I'm covering intentionally 8 things that I think are fundamental to a philosophy of small group that produces measurable results in people's lives. So that's the topic here. And how the pieces come together in the jigsaw puzzle will become clear with reflection over time as we maybe look at it again and maybe again after that. So next, number 6, looking at the essentiality of annual goals to life-changing small groups. Nice piece of poetry to start with. A vision without a plan is a... Does anyone know this? It's a drudgery. Oh no, a dream. I apologise. A vision without a plan is a dream, because a plan without a vision is a drudgery, and a vision with a plan is a destiny. Isn't that beautiful? And I wonder sometimes if what we're guilty of in our small groups, unintentionally, is kind of making it up as we go and making it up month by month. And because we do that, there's no clear vision which has defined our plan. And because a vision never defined our plan, we're not actually taking the group anywhere.
Right. Yep.
So if I miss a week, it really doesn't matter, right? Because it's just, we do this week, we do that next week, we do that the next. There's no journey to be a part of. And especially those who like to achieve something in life, who are more left-brained or task-oriented, goal-oriented, they want to actually know that they're achieving or accomplishing something through their involvement in their small group. And I think that Jesus does as well, if I might just put him with that group. So 3 types of goals: personal goals, outreach goals, and group goals. And again, these aren't really student notes I've given you. They just have pretty much all the points in them, so you could pass it on easily. Pastor Alan gave us a mentoring form earlier in the year. It looked like this, for us to meet one-on-one with 1 or 2 people to be encouraging them. And he had in here a holistic health check, and it had these areas in your notes. At the beginning of a year, we could ask members to all write goals for themselves in these 8 areas: relationship with God, work and school, family and marriage, finance, physical health, social life and friends, recreation, and then ministry or volunteer service, and I would include outreach with that. And if a group were to write those goals and a leader were to write them down, what it does is it actually empowers you as a leader to begin to lead intentionally for measurable growth and change within people's lives. So to read through the points that I've typed in underneath, areas for growth can inform the content and the activity plans. So a whole lot of people say, for example, that they're struggling with financial things and whatever else, then you make that a topic that you're going to look at during the year. Right. Or a whole lot of people are struggling with their work-life balance. So go and find the God at Work course that Alpha has, for example. It's a video series with discussion questions. I found it free online. You could watch that as a group across 6 or 8 weeks. Reminders can then be put in your calendar to encourage individuals in their application at the relevant time of the year. So, for example, there could be 3 people who say, our marriage isn't as flash as it could be, and you're aware that the church has got a marriage course coming up in July. So it's January or February, and you grab your phone out and you just say, remind so-and-so about the marriage course, and you place that mid-June, at least 2 or 3 weeks before you're aware that it's going to start. And you go through people's goals, and you do that for maybe 2 or 3 things per person, just putting it into your phone. All you have to do is send them a text message, and it could be the difference between them attending or not, right? That's simple. Group members could be given a copy of their goals in July and October to discuss and refine the goals and their application for the next season of time. So what I'm saying is that you spend an entire session on goals at the start of a year. I think this is worthwhile. And then you get a copy as the leader, and you give it back to them so they can assess their progress in July. And you again spend an entire session doing it, because really it's not about the task, it's about listening to people and caring. It's about seeing how they're going. And they had desires to change or to grow. Are they achieving that? What encouragement do they need? That empowers you as a leader. Their feedback is your food for leadership. But then October is probably more for them to assess how they went for the whole year. I say October because November and December kind of go crazy in my world. And so that's kind of the end of the year to me for that sort of thing. But they could begin to reflect on what they would want to achieve the next year. And if you've been intentional through the year, they might have some real measurable changes that have taken place within their lives. There could be good reason for a bit of a celebration. So the missing gap in your notes there is the result is measurable change. And surely this is what we want. We want testimonies of people who are growing in Christ, no matter what their stage of life, no matter what their stage of faith development, measurable, observable change. Now regarding outreach goals, these are rather simple. An exercise to do in your goal setting at the start of the year. Number 1, everyone lists 5 friends, and the missing words are to encourage toward faith. Now I haven't put in there 5 friends to make Christians, just because I think our vocabulary is important. You can't make anyone a Christian, right? It's not 5 friends to get saved, even though saving souls is part of our church, leadership goals. But in something that's going to be written on paper that others might see, which this might, just be careful of the language. So 5 to encourage toward faith. List, secondly, their hindrances. What might hinder them coming to faith? Maybe they're really busy and they feel angry at the church for its past sins. Maybe they are preoccupied with a secular narrative surrounded by modern media people with their anti-religious bias, and their whole world is consumed in that, so they just think that Christianity is prejudicial and judgmental. I'm just thinking of, that's two people in my mind, what I would consider the hindrance. Those things are for prayer, but also for conversation. You seem to be rather kind of angsty whenever we talk about religion. Why is that? You see, there's questions that could be asked. Thirdly, list their interests, because those are going to be your social connection points, but they also could become your group's social connection points. You see, if the leader were to take all let's say there's 10 or 15 people in a group, if there's 10 people, they would have a list of 50 people that are about to be prayed for that coming year to come toward faith.
Great.
And if you had a list of the hindrances and the interests, not only might it inform some of your discussion topics, and just imagine yourself saying, this week we're going to look at the topic of God and suffering, because half of you said you've got friends for whom this is real. Let's make sure we've all got a clear answer. That brings a level of intentionality and meaning and excitement to that topic. You see what I'm saying? Whereas just bringing it up as a topic without that connection feels flat by comparison from a leadership perspective. Lost my point going on that segue. That was a good segue though, eh? That brings momentum to a small group. But yeah, you could list the interests, that's it. And you might discover out of those 50 people that 10 of them are interested in, I don't know, give it to me. What are they interested in?
Fishing.
Fishing, yeah. All right, so he had a boat. You know, you've got friends who want to go fishing. I've got the gift of the gab. Take me with your friends on his boat, right? That's the gist of it. What else might you find a whole lot of people interested in? Exercise. All feeling they put on too much over Christmas and they want to lose weight. So you decide that as a small group, you could set a social goal that you're going to do 3 two-day tramps in the next 6 months as a social goal in team building for the group. As exercise, some people need to build up to it, let them. Then maybe you decide on Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m. you're going to climb the mountain every Wednesday. Now, you've got friends who are saying they need more exercise. Hey, by the way, every Wednesday I do the mount at 6 a.m. Do you want to come? I'll give you a phone call at 5:15. You know? Suddenly you've got other people joining you for this walk. You're down by 7. You all go home and have a shower and take off to work. Guess what's happening? I can guarantee you there'd be results from that sort of intentionality, and all you did was achieve your own goals while including other people amongst your friends. So by being intentional in goals, you can sit back and look at it. It informs your program ideas, which increases your intentionality in your results. So the leader keeps a master list. These are the people prayed for in the first session of each month as you transition from welcome before looking at the word. Members are encouraged to intentionally engage conversations and share testimonies. That's the 3rd week of each month. And the group considers activities to connect. The final area of goals is very simple, and that's group goals. And you don't have to have many group goals, but having looked at what the individual goals are and what your outreach goals are, you could just consider together, what else would you like us to achieve together as a group? And you might just come up with 2 or 3 things. It doesn't have to be spectacular, and that could bring another level of intentionality to your group. What I'm trying to say is that that goals session takes up 2.5 of your 52 weeks. But what does doing this goals session add to the way that you lead? It can completely transform the way you lead, because you are no longer just coming with different content every week as it feels good to you, or whatever rhetoric you want to put around that. You are coming with a mandate from them to lead. And you are meeting with their felt needs that they have told you. You are also connecting with their desire to be effective in outreach, kind of with their invitation and participation, with their friends' names and with their friends' interests, helping them achieve their goals. And you add big coins to the jar when you suddenly give them a call and just say, hey, I remember at the start of the year you were saying this, this and this. I'm just wondering how you're going with that, because you took a note in February to ask them a question in July. So small bits of intentionality can make a big difference. I'll open it up just in case you've got any questions. But so far we've covered 6 of 8 areas that are in my basic small group training. And they sit as a paradigm. It's not overly complicated. It's just, you know, your head's busy if it's new. Yeah, so any questions? Yeah.
What about people who come in and go all the time in groups? In other words, they're not there the whole year. They're not there at the beginning to set goals. There's a lot of groups of people just come occasionally.
Yeah. It would be up to you how you manage that. I mean, I'm thinking if some people turned up to a group I was leading, I'd go and have a coffee with them, and I'd just say, in our group, we're all doing this. Could you do this as well? And so you get them to establish some goals for the year, and you say, can I encourage you in these? And so you just find a way by putting a few memos in your own calendar to encourage them whether they attend or not. And that might help them to be a bit more intentional in the way they live. It might also begin to excite some of them. They might turn up more often as well, because the group isn't ad hoc week by week. The group is actually attempting to achieve some measurable goals. Yeah.
A comment.
Yeah.
I've been leading and training groups for ages. I'm not just going to find one.
You're an encouraging man. Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
really
Cool.
good.
Cool.
Thank you.
So the groups that are perhaps a little bit more, or totally social, because we do have
Yeah.
them in this room, but where they're totally social but trying to build relationship, but there is no room for the studies and maybe the goal setting.
Yeah.
Is there any?
You still do goal setting.
Yeah, I suppose you can.
Yeah. So what, a group based around what sort of activity? Just randomly?
Fishing.
Based around fishing, yeah. I guess if that's more of an outreach group than a church small group,
Yeah.
it's probably the intentionality of those who love Jesus to be praying together for that group
Yeah.
and meeting every week or every second week to pray and to bring intentionality to what they're doing. Otherwise, it could descend into a fishing group, which might kind of miss some of the purpose or potential of it. The other would be that the expectations the group has from the beginning set the pattern for what it's going to be for the rest of it.
And I think that's
So,
it.
yeah.
The expectations at the
Yeah.
beginning. Is
Yeah.
this just to do, like we've got a craft group, for
Yeah.
example. Is it just to do craft, or is it to actually build relationship with people?
Yeah.
And, you know, these are women, so it's to build relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, just goes.
So it could be the boldness at the beginning to say, this is going to be a craft group. We're going to meet 35 times during this year, but for 3 of those sessions, we're going to have an on-point, or once a month, we're going to have an on-point discussion, and we're going to start it today by simply saying, what are some of the challenges of your life that you'd like to grow through or overcome? And you just get the group to participate, both church people and non-church people, in that conversation. That would set the tone probably for what gets discussed while you're sitting there, you know, doing that. Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Cool. Very good. Oh, thank you all.
Thank you, Doug.